This channel is supported by Truefire. Truefire is an online library of
You can get the Truefire All Access Pass for as cheap as they ever do it, the $99 thing. So just jump and do that if you're looking for the best price you can get Truefire All Access for.
I thought we should revisit this, the Behringer Centaur thing, because actually there's a little bit more stuff that's happened here. So if you hadn't already seen about this, Behringer are being sued by Bill Finnegan, who was the creator of the Klon. There's a musician in every human being. Our purpose is to empower those who have not and cannot. Together we are Music Tribe. That's Uli Behringer, what you have to say on it. But I watched David Barber and Keith from fivewattworld. They did a stream where they used my playing without asking. That's cloning. I'm Klon Geordie, by the way. I work for Behringer. Anyway, yes. So in that, there was kind of some fairly cool history stuff. I've also watched a couple JHS videos around this, and the plot kind of thickens a bit. But not only that, you now got classic stuff going on where people are trying to sell their now hard to find, or at the moment hard to find, Behringer Centaurs for extortionate prices. So what is going on there? The Klon, I think, had a fairly decent run of like a decade, nearly a couple of decades of being produced without being cloned. And if you listen to David Barber on this, he said like essentially there was kind of an understanding in the pedal world that you would try not to step on other people's toes at the time, and you would, there wasn't like this thing which seems to be the case these days where it's kind of just understood that, and it's not, maybe not even true, like where it's propagated that basically every pedal is based on something else. I think that's basically the narrative, or the kind of prevailing view now, is that pretty much every pedal is a clone of something else. Go a little bit back and before the Klon, and maybe that wasn't really even seen to be the case. And so David Barber talked about his tone press, which essentially, with one other guy who gets credited for this, created the term parallel compression. And prior to David Barber's tone press, like this idea of having a compressor where you could blend in the dry signal hadn't really come about. So there are original ideas within pedal manufacture. I think that's one of the things that is kind of been minimized over the years, right? So anyway, 2009, free stomp boxes, essentially a community of, DIY guys that are interested in building their own pedals, essentially DIY pedal building community, which have been really quite important for a number of reasons. But they club together, they purchase a Klon, they de-goop it, and that is what gives rise to JHS, interestingly enough, creating the first clone, which he called the Klon. I think there's a horse on it. You can check that out, but that's kind of interesting. And he got a call from Bill Finnegan, who asked him, the Klon was out of production apparently at the time, and Josh made him a vow that as soon as he started making it, he would stop producing one. So the Klon KTR comes around. I think this was after EHX had already kind of done the thing where the Soul Food is, it's not an exact clone if you actually look into the schematics of it from people that know about this stuff, but it is pretty close, right? But it doesn't copy any of the aesthetics, just called Soul Food, and this is kind of the first mass manufactured go on this. So yeah, the EHX Soul Food really kind of pushes the floodgates open. And then J Rockett with the Archer. So apparently J Rockett were responsible for building the first Klon KTR batches, and so they ended up not working together after a while for whatever reason. It sounds like David Barber and Bill Finnegan had talked about trying to get these things to work. You know, he compared the sounds of a Klon to the Klon KTR, which was SMT stuff, right? And things weren't working. He was like, I need to figure out why this isn't sounding exactly the same. David Barber and Bill Finnegan kind of talked around this subject. Like, Bill does seem to actually care about these things being as close to his Klon as possible. And so, yes, then the Klon KTR comes out. Josh stops building the Klon, but it's kind of too late anyway, because by this point now, you get the wave of other people building a Klon. And that's kind of the way it is right now, yeah? Pretty much. And Bill has kind of no... Because he didn't patent the circuit, his protection for the circuit was goop. Patenting a circuit can be expensive and hard to even get it to stick, apparently, anyway. Even if there are unique things about the pedal, which, you know, people agree that the Klon does do unique things, it's not just a copy of anything else. The Not a Klon comes out a couple of years ago. That's Josh's take on a Klon, like a direct clone, even down to the goop. I guess the final the final insult is the Behringer Centaur, which even goes as far as not even bothering to change the name. And I think this is what we're starting to see more and more, is because there's been this perpetuated idea that cloning of a pedal is not just normal, it's kind of just what's always happened, which I think might not actually be that true from, you know, these boutique builders like David Barber who were there a while ago, right? It's not always been the case that people would just do their own version of a circuit and then market it. That is what it is these days, more or less, right? There's a tube screamer, and every company has their version of a tube screamer. There's a Klon, every company has their version of a Klon. There's a big muff, everyone has their version of a big muff. That's kind of what we get a lot at the moment, right? And it's just, you know, putting your own company's marketing enclosure around it. So that's kind of interesting. And Behringer, they kind of broke the rules by using the name Centaur, copying the trade dress, but that's been happening with other companies as well. Warm Audio did it, Cherrytone have done it. Cherrytone were one of the early cloners as well. Even John Mayer had them on his board. But I think it's kind of just got to the point now where it's a little bit... I mean, it must be so upsetting for Bill Finnegan in some ways, because this is a guy who basically built 8,000 of them on a card table in Boston by hand, because that's what he wanted to do. Then he went into like a bit more of a mass manufactured thing because there was appetite for that, and basically got his fingers burned there as well, because then who he was working with essentially just went and built their own version of what they were working on together anyway. And it just doesn't seem like it's ever had the numbers, like manufacturing wise, to maybe get what he was deserved in this. So maybe the Behringer Centaur thing, I don't know if there's been no real update in that part of the story, like in terms of what's happening with that lawsuit. Behringer don't seem to have actually delivered huge numbers of these yet. Let me know in the comments if you've got one, but like there were about 20 at Andertons. That's the first time that I've seen them come into stock at Andertons. They were announced in November 2024. We're now in June, and they're starting to hit around the world a bit. I think they got hit with a cease and desist in January. that's kind of where the story's going with this, and they're, you know, selling realistically for more than asking now, which is kind of crazy. Behringer have done this for years. This is maybe a different one where they've actually used a trademark, which is a little bit, I guess, silly, but in different parts of the world you can't really even fight them on this, and probably Behringer are so big that it won't even really matter to them, and maybe they just won't send them to the US. Who knows what will happen, but the story is kind of getting sillier and sillier as it goes, and I kind of just wanted to get out and check it again, because it's kind of like, well, is this what the pedal industry is in 2025? Essentially putting your own enclosure around a circuit and going, that's our take on the Klon. Is that what we want? Is that what we need? I think it's probably what you're getting. Anyway, so that's the Klon Centaur. It actually sounds pretty good. It feels decent in the hand. It's smaller than a KTR, I think. But I don't really love Klons anyway. But yeah, let me know in the comments whether you're that interested in Klons. I guess the Archer is probably the smallest, like most board friendly take on it, but it looks like Keeley have now got their take on a Klon where you can switch out the diodes and a couple of bits and pieces, like little mods on it. But yeah, that's the Klon story. I do feel for Bill Finnegan. The original kind of Klons that he built were never going for crazy money when he was selling them. He was selling them for like the price of a boutique pedal. Whatever that is, has stayed kind of consistent, and you probably never sold Klon KTRs in enough quantities to make millions. But the Klon itself, as an entity, has made, I think, quite a lot of people quite a lot of money, probably, and maybe it'll make Behringer some now. Cheers for stopping by. Let me know your thoughts on the controversy, yeah. I think David Beebe's got a video on this going out today as well. He got one. He's just taken a while making his video, but I think it's an interesting kind of look into the ethics of this stuff, and how things have changed a bit in quite a short amount of time. Kind of interesting.